Welcome back to the Majestic Devlog. I'm creating the Majestic, a casual, open world exploration game. And in this devlog, I'm going to talk about the giant water update I've done for the game. This is a very large update. It took me several weeks, a lot of little pieces to it. From populating the lakes and rivers with wildlife and plant life to the swimming feature. There's a lot that went into this. As you can tell right away, this game features a lot of water features, a lot of streams and lakes, waterfalls. Other maps have oceans and large bodies of water. And I'm using various water assets to cover all these different scenarios. And when coming up with a water system, I had to think about what would work for all of these different situations. So what I did is basically ripped out the standard implementation of water and decided to basically customize it on my own and do what will work for me. So here you can see the character dives into the stream and the lake here, and when underwater you can see there's plant life, and you see the post-process effect of the underwater. And when coming up with the swimming system, since you're a bird character, I didn't think swimming underwater was really a feature that was needed, but I wanted the player to be able to dive into the water. So basically what I came up with is the player can dive into the water, and then the character will rise to the surface. And once on the surface of the water, the player can choose to move around in any which direction and can take off from on top of the water surface and start flying around again. You can't swim around underwater, but you can dive into the water and be under the water for a certain amount of time. It's still rough. I just made the system in place, and now it needs animation tweaks and just look better, more particles, water effects, bubbles, splashes, more things to sell the water system. But since I spent so much time getting to this point, I am planning to do some of that polish at a later date. As long as the movement works as expected and the player can navigate the water systems as intended, then at this point I feel it's good enough for now. All that said, here I am setting up the plant life, and I basically used procedural generation. I have these underwater plant assets. I picked out a selection of assets and went through the materials and modified them. I like things to have a certain style. And I set up the procedural systems, and then I throw these procedural systems over my water bodies, and it generates all these plants at the bottom of the water. So with this plant life, I wanted it to be fairly dense and look very lively. Since it is so dense, I'm culling the plant life very aggressively, which, since you'll be underwater and can't see as far as if you were not in the water, I can get away with culling the plant life aggressively here. And here in this stream, you can see the plant life is in there as well. And I just, everywhere there's some sort of water body, I just have this procedural plant life at the bottom. Here in my test level is where I set up the assets. I kind of decided which ones I wanted to use and what would look good together, and then from there I set up the procedural systems. So after setting up the plant life, I then moved on to the fish. I wanted large schools of fish to be swimming around. Since you won't be in the water or under the water very long, I want to try to create large schools where the player will have a better chance of seeing the fish when they dive in. So I took these underwater fish, which were skeletal meshes, and to help performance, I converted them to static meshes, because since the player won't be swimming under the water, I don't think they really need to be animated or move. You're only going to see them for a split second. So I took the static mesh and then used that in a Niagara system and created a large particle system with these different types of fish. And then my particle systems, which have already been set up previously, spawn the fish in the lakes and rivers. There's still some tweaking that needs to be done, as I found the fish are still hard to come by. So I'm going to make some changes to spawn even more fish in the lakes and rivers so the player has a better chance at finding them. Accompanying the particle effects, I do have a trigger volume in these schools of fish that when the player overlaps the trigger volume, they are presented the chance to try catching a fish, which then adds a fish to the player's inventory, and then they can choose to consume the fish if they so desire. These particle systems with the fish are spawned randomly, and I have these line traces that detect the water surface, and then it detects the water floor, and then the fish effects are spawned at a distance between the surface and the floor. So now for the swimming mode for the character, which is totally custom and not a normal swimming mode, I felt it needed to be done in C++ because the character movement component has it's set up better for movement, and it's more efficient, but it requires C++, which I'm very inexperienced at. So for this task, I decided I would try to rely on some ChatGPT instruction, and over the course of 3 or 4 days, I was able to develop the swimming mode. Here I'm slowing down the character when they enter the water to come to a smooth stop. Once at a stop, the character will be raised to the surface. And then here is some of the programming with some other functions. This was a really big task for me. This is something that it's one of those things you enter it, you have this vision in mind, and there's just so many pieces to the puzzle. And ChatGPT is not the be-all end-all answer. Of course, I need to figure out so many different pieces of the puzzle. There were just so many little problems cropping up, all the way down to the animations. You can see here in this clip, the character stopped animating. I believe most of that might be fixed now. It's kind of frozen in place. To accommodate all the different water bodies, I basically got rid of physics volumes and post-process volumes for water, which is what you would typically rely on. And instead, I'm relying on line traces, which the character's already doing for the flying system. So I kind of took the line trace, and I'm now detecting if there's water underneath the character. If the character goes below the water surface, then the character enters the swimming mode, the custom swimming mode, and if the camera goes below the water, the underwater effect will be put on the screen. It's all being done with line traces, and there's no physics volumes and no post-process volumes. I have a physical material on the water surface, and the physical material is labeled water body. So I have a physical material that's water body for large bodies of water, and the line trace is searching for that physical material to determine if there's a swimmable water body. And once one is detected, then that's when all these systems start coming online if the character happens to be below the surface of that water body. With this whole system in place, it's very extendable to oceans and any other water body I want. It helps with rivers that are typically at an angle, where if you try post-process volumes, that you gotta align them to the angle of the river. The line trace seems to work almost perfectly from my testing. So I'm pretty happy with the work that was done with the swimming mode and detecting water There are definitely some polish and tweaks that need to happen here, but I just think water in an open world is one of those things. It just makes the world so much more interactable if you can go in the water. So I definitely wanted to make it a priority. So that's the giant water update for the game. It was quite an endeavor. I know it might not look like much, but there was a lot to it, and I'm pretty happy with where we're at right now. The world it opened up a whole new section of the world, and I'm pretty happy with where it's at the moment. So if you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care.